Pizza Rustica, also known as Easter pie, is a rich Italian stuffed deep dish pizza that goes all the way back to the 1600s. And it's meant to celebrate both Easter and the end of Lent. It is loaded with different cheeses, cured meats, and eggs that's then baked in a flaky pastry crust until golden brown. And I have to say, it's pretty dang tasty. Let's start off by making that crust. Sound good? Let's bake. I'm going to be starting with a half cup each of unsalted butter and lard. Now you can use just one or the other or a combination like I did. What I'm going to do is just pop it in the freezer for 10 minutes to get it ice cold. This is a crucial step to make sure our pie crust is flaky. And in the meantime, I'm just going to get started on this. In a food processor, I'm adding in 3 cups of good Italian 00 flour. You can easily substitute with bread or all-purpose flour. Next, I'm adding in about a half teaspoon of coarse salt. Then I'm just going to pulse it on high speed until everything is combined. Once our fat is ice cold after that 10-minute period, I'm going to add it in right into that food processor. And if the lard is in one big chunk, I'm just going to break it down into smaller pieces so that it incorporates easily and more evenly. And I'm just going to pulse it on high speed until the butter is incorporated into the flour. The best way I can describe on what it looks and feels like is like a finely grated Parmigiano Reggiano. When I press it together, it clumps. I'm going to place back on my lid, turn the speed on to high, and then add in 2 large eggs, one at a time. Don't add in the second egg until the first one is completely incorporated. This is going to add an incredible amount of fat and structure to our pie crust, making it that much more delicious. And once that second egg is incorporated, I'm just going to have a look. You can see there are a few big clumps, but there's also a good amount of flour and butter that has not yet incorporated. So I'm going to add back on that lid. And then on high speed, I'm going to pour in 2 to 3 tablespoons of ice cold water. That's all it's going to take. And you'll know you're good when the dough starts to form together and looks just like this. You'll have several large clumps, and when you squeeze it, the dough holds together. This is perfect. Transferring now over to my butcher's block, just going to give it a quick dust of flour. We're taking out the dough, and you don't need to knead it, but what I am going to do is form it into a little ball, but press it down into a disc that's maybe about 1.5 to 2 inches thick. It's important not to overwork the dough to prevent it from becoming really tough. Then I'm going to wrap it up in plastic wrap, and we're now just going to let it rest in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes, which is going to help make it easier to handle and roll out. But this is great because in the meantime, we can make our stuffing, beginning with 1 pound of whole milk ricotta cheese. Now, because in the States, this always has a good amount of liquid in it, I'm just going to set it in a colander and set it to the side for the next 15 to 20 minutes and help drain off some of that liquid. Now, a better option if you have access to it is buffalo or sheep's milk ricotta cheese. The flavors are so much more intense and so much more delicious. Next up, we want to finely grate about 1 cup of Pecorino Romano cheese. Now this ingredient is pretty forgiving in this recipe, so if you're a little bit over or a little bit under, no problem. But for me, I'm just going to eyeball it. And you know how I always like to grate cheese on parchment paper. Makes it easy to transport and one less dish to clean. Next, let's bring out our last cheese. And Comies, you definitely have a few options here. You can use a mozzarella or even provolone. Now for the mozzarella, if you want it to be extra cheesy and get that beautiful stringy pull every time you cut into this pizza rustica, then you're going to want to do a low moisture part skim milk. Fresh mozzarella like I have here, still great flavor, but you're not gonna get that extra cheesy, pulley goodness like you would with a low moisture. Now for provolone, you will get all of that goodness and still have flavor. That's the one that I like. However, the classic cheese to use here is something known as scamorza. Now this is a smoked cheese, but it's really hard to find, especially in the area that I'm in. Now, great options would be a smoked provolone or even a smoked mozzarella. I didn't have luck with either of these, so provolone is what I'm gonna go with. Now for this 8-ounce block of provolone cheese, and because it's in a weird round shape, I'm going to slice it in half, then lay it flat so it's not rocking back and forth, and then slice it in half again from there. Now what I'm looking to do is cut this cheese into 1/2-inch cubes, and it will roughly total about 1.5 cups. Once you're done, set it to the side. And for a little chef tip coming up, place a non-stick skillet on your burner. We're gonna come back to that in a few minutes. And now it's time to cut up our cured meats, beginning with 1 pound of ham. We want to cut these in the exact same size cube as we just did to that provolone cheese, about a 1/2 inch. And any style of ham will work for this recipe. And yes, I like that smoked skin on for more flavor. Now you can have some culinary intuition here. If you like ham, you can add a little bit more. It's no problem. The goal is always to become a better cook, not just a better recipe follower. And for my next cured meat, I have 8 ounces of Napoli salami. And just like the ham, any style of salami will work, and I'm also wanting to cut it in the exact same size. Now, I personally believe that just using what you have on hand is the best option. Now, you can go to the meat department and go crazy and get as extravagant as you want, but it's going to cost you. You also have to remember that when a lot of Italians came to America in the 19th century, they brought a lot of their recipes with them. And for those early iterations, a lot of it was based on what they had available and what they could even find. And for this recipe specifically, ham, salami, pepperoni, another big staple in Pizza Rustica. And I honestly think this is going to be plenty of meats and plenty of different kind of meats just with the salami and ham. And there's really no reason to overcomplicate things by adding 3 or 4 more cured meats to this dish. However, again, if you want to go nuts, have at it. For me, 2 is going to be good. Just continuing to cut those long strips and then turning and cubing it. Now, some other meats that you could use here are capicola, prosciutto, pancetta, or even mortadella. Set the cured meats to the side, and next I have a large bowl with 8 large eggs in them. They can be chilled or room temperature. And we are going to whisk the eggs to incorporate air and give them a nice fluffy texture. Now let's grab our ricotta cheese that's been straining, and you can see there's a good amount of liquid in the bottom. We are going to add that right to the bowl with the large eggs. Next, I'm adding in my provolone cheese, and then at this stage, I'm just going to start folding all the ingredients together to get them mixed in. Once those 3 ingredients are incorporated, I'm next going to pour in my Pecorino Romano cheese, fold that in until it is completely combined, and you'll immediately notice that the egg mixture will start to thicken. And then I'm going to mix in our cured meats. This looks perfect. And this recipe has to make one of the thickest egg batters around, but it's supposed to be like this. Now, because there are a lot of salty ingredients in here, like the cured meats and even the cheeses, I'm going to give a gentle season of coarse salt and fresh cracked black pepper. I'm going to mix them in, and then to go back to my little chef tip, take a small spoonful of just the eggs and go back over to that cooktop where that nonstick skillet is. It's over medium heat. I'm going to add in just a little bit of olive oil. I want to fry a little bit of this up. I want to see what it tastes like. Does it need a little bit more salt and pepper, or are we good and it's perfectly seasoned? Doing these little things throughout the cooking process is such a great way to know our food is properly seasoned and tasty. And for this, we're good to go. Set the batter briefly to the side. Then I'm pulling out our dough from the refrigerator. Going to give it a quick dust on both sides with a little bit of flour. And then I'm going to use a bench knife and I'm going to cut away about 1/3 of it. That's going to be used for the top of the Pizza Rustica. And for the remaining 2/3 piece, we are going to roll it out until it's about 18 inches in diameter and roughly a 1/4 inch thick. Now for me, a good way to know I'm at the right size is I take my 9-inch springform pan that it's going in, I place it right in the center, pull the dough up to the sides, and if it goes past, I know I'm going to have plenty of dough to fit inside. Then for an easy transport, just place your pin towards one side of the dough and then just simply roll it up. And from there, grab it by the ends and move it along. And now for this 9-inch springform pan, I'm always a little nervous with stuff like this. And because I was always taught, no matter what, nonstick spray and parchment paper, well, I'm going to do both. Although in the end, you're really not going to need it. But for me, I always have Chef Barbini in the back of my head. Nonstick spray, parchment, no excuses. Next, just roll the dough over the springform pan and then begin to form it by pressing down the sides of that pan all the way to the bottom piece to essentially make a perfect well that is formed tightly to the inside of the pan. Perfect. Now I'm going to grab my egg, cheese, and cured meat stuffing and pour it right into the center. And then using that spoon or rubber spatula, just smooth it out to flatten it out a little bit. Now I'm gonna head back over to my butcher's block where that last 1/3 piece is, going to give it a quick dust with flour and roll it out again, just enough to cover the top of my pan and until it's about a 1/4 inch thick. This looks fantastic. I'm gonna roll it back up just like in the other one and then roll it over the top. And then I'm just going to form it to the sides a little bit and press it down just until it meets the egg stuffing. Now, using a very sharp knife, cut the excess dough off right at the top of the springform pan, going all the way around. Now, you'll probably have a good amount of dough left. I always make extra. I just can't help myself. But guess what? This dough was barely worked. You can pop it in the freezer or refrigerator to use for your next pie recipe. So now going back over to that pan, we are going to firmly now press together the seams all the way around the pan. Then I'm going to begin folding inwards and folding slightly over. This is going to create a little rim on the outside and also ensure all those stuffing ingredients are kept inside and not coming out. And if you ask me, I love the way this looks. Now I'm going to grab one whisked large egg and I'm going to generously brush the top. Now you'll maybe use a quarter to a half of this whisked egg, and doing this is going to give us a beautiful golden brown top. Now I always cook springform pans on a sheet tray, and because I'm an absolute fool with it, you know I've lined it with parchment paper. Again, Chef Barbini, parchment paper on everything. It's going in a preheated oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to take in between 60 and 65 minutes for this to completely finish baking, to have a firm stuffing and a beautiful golden brown crust. And if you want to temp it, it should be around 160 degrees Fahrenheit internally. Let's pull out our Pizza Rustica. Oh my gosh. Yes, my friends. This is what we want. The only hard part now is letting it cool down for about 20 to 30 minutes before eating it. And this Pizza Rustica, or Pizza Rustica, looks amazing. It really does. The crust is beautifully golden brown, and it always goes back to these fundamental, basic cooking and baking techniques. Getting the dough right, knowing where it's at in every single stage. And something as simple as tasting things throughout the process. So important to get it right so that your food is properly seasoned. I can never say that enough. All right, we need to let this camp out for a little bit longer, and then we're going to slice it up and I'll show you how I plate it up. I like to run a butter knife around the outside of my crust just to make sure nothing is sticking. Then release the buckle on the pan, lift up, and look at our gorgeous pie. Let's take a nice big fat slice right through the center, pull it out, perfectly cooked, perfect crust. Oh my gosh, I don't want to wait any longer. Let's go. I'm just gonna pop it on a plate and add an optional garnish of finely minced fresh flat leaf Italian parsley. Brunch is served. And while this is traditionally more of a holiday meal, if you ask me, it's solid to serve up all year long at any brunch. But if you're really into those big holiday meals, you absolutely have got to check out my roast beef. It's cheaper and every bit as good as a prime rib. Got a great recipe video. I'll see you on there.